Okay, now to come to quarries. So we've got two quarry representatives here. One is tarmac and one is tarmac first. On your lakes, question is very simple: are your lakes pumping into the River Lug?
It's part of our planning conditions, and we are allowed to discharge water into the River Lug and goes via the brook. We have a planning condition that we can pump 15,000 cube per day if required. Now at the moment we only pump for 6 months of the year, so we stop pumping in October, and we don't fire up the pumps again then until end of this month. So we have 6 months during the real wet weather, but we can't control the water. There's just too much groundwater, etc. So we turn the pumps off, pull the pumps out, we let the area flood, so it rebounds to the natural groundwater table, and then we don't put the pumps back in until the end of this month. And then we dewater then to allow the extraction of groundwater. So during the winter months, we do not discharge into the River Lug. But what we do, we campaign the material out in the summer months, the mineral. We stockpile it on top of ground, and then basically we process that material during the winter months. But it doesn't require us to dewater. Yes.
So this year alone, we've lost 15 days production due to flooding on the main road.
Basically, it comes straight through the site, and when it floods, and we can have 3/4 of a metre of water. You can't even get into the site or into the offices when it does flood. So we're in the same situation as the people. I know we're a business, but it does well. And the railhead.
And you hold the accountable for that project? Or actually, do you find you do accountable in your mind for that project?
Well, Nick knows a little bit more than how he monitors the flooding.
So I monitor the river level before it breaks up the river. It comes from the River Lug. It doesn't come from the brook. The brook doesn't flood besides that. Very, very little comes out of the brook. It comes from the River Lug.
Because there is another which might be a pre-submitted question. Are the lakes full to the maximum?
At this time of year they are. But during the summer months when we do dewater, we have to drop the lake about a metre and a half in the extraction area, just so that we can get to the mineral. But this time of year, let's say we turn the pumps off, water levels rebound to natural groundwater table level, and we monitor those levels monthly, and our environmental team monitors those levels, so they can say when it's peaking. So the top line is where it peaks, and that's the last 5 or 6 years, and the bottom line is when it drops. And that's monitored monthly, and records are kept.
If anyone wants to have a look at that graph afterwards, please do so. Your questions, Barry, did you want to?
Yeah, there is one point. Why are you saying that the lakes you don't pump out in the winter? The marsh is on a lower level than your lakes. Because you're not pumping and the lakes are high, could the water ingress down into the marsh and therefore be causing a problem with Welsh water by getting into the sewage?
I don't know the exact answer to that, but the problem we've got with the sewer, it is the water table. But you it's the marshes, you will have a high water table. So our pipe work is leaking basically, but it's leaking the opposite way. It's allowing the water into the system, and during those winter periods with that wet weather, it's really affected, especially the last 2 years because of the winter. We've looked at what we can do there, and unfortunately the only thing we've been able to do over the last 2 winters is the tankering, which I apologise for, because I understand that's caused absolute havoc for people in the village. And it's also caused problems for some of the customers with the use of the facilities. So I apologise there as well. What we are doing, we are putting some mitigation measures in, put some non-return valves to help certain vulnerable customers who are affected. But we have secured some funding to reline the pipes in the marshes part of the village. We did a section in Wellington last summer, and that's worked. They identified a section of sewer which was allowing a lot of water in only in the winter period. But because we've lined that this year, our telemetry measurements in the pumping station in Wellington, that is working fine. It's going up and down as the pumps work. So the year before, it was up constant throughout the whole winter, and we couldn't get the levels down. But since we've done the lining in Wellington, it's worked. But it hadn't. We hadn't done any lining in the marshes because there was a lot more work needed, and we didn't know where the water was getting in. We've managed to get the levels down with the tankers working over the winter period, and we've cambered all the pipe work on the main sewers, and it's basically told us we need to reline the whole lot because it's just pouring in quite a lot of places. So we have started. We've done about 170 meters in this week, and we'll be coming back once we've secured our second batch of money in after April to come back and do a lot more lining work there. With hopefully, we can't say for definite, but by relining those sewers, we'll be protecting the pipework to stop the water coming in. But I can't answer the question. We can't tell what difference would come.
I'm just thinking, because the lakes, the water in the lake is higher than the marsh. So I'm just saying, could water seepage come out the lakes and be seeping back into the village? Like when they first done the thing, it drained all the wells that the lakes filled up. Could the water then be back flowing, because the lakes are full up, down to the marsh, that's the clue, a marsh, and causing the water. It's only coming in the winter. It's just, as the gentleman said, only the time in the winter is when the pump is switched off.
Can I just say something? Taking you up on that, one of the questions that was pre-submitted is the quarries of tarmac are increasingly expanding and the pits are subsequently flooded. This may be altering the height of the water table. Does that speak to your point? Anything you want to say about that?
No, I've spoken to our hydrologist in relation to that. That groundwater table, in his opinion, having those big voids that we create, those big ponds that we create, actually helps the situation because it can contain floodwater, groundwater, storage area, rather than just having all ground there. So he doesn't think that we're really affecting anything at the moment. In relation to your point with the marshes, I can ask that question of him if you remember it. And I'll just ask that question about the lagoons, flood marshes. Where it's taking. Yeah. And we'll come back to you on that one.
Moving on to what will be the new quarry on the other side of the A49. What's your understanding of the issues in Wellington as regards flooding?
Obviously, the new quarry is downstream of Wellington, so our assessment really looks at that area and impacts that we might have further downstream. Because of the road and the culverts, anything that we do on our site is highly unlikely to affect anything the other side of the A49. So I'm aware of the flooding because I looked at flood maps, but no, we haven't had to look at it in any detail.
I do have some more questions for you. As the southern boundary of your site is effectively Wellington Brook, what reassurances can you give us that there will be no impact on the brook or its ability to flood in the fields downstream of the A49? Will the flood area be affected once the quarry work at the A49 entrance to the village starts?
So the quarry has a 10-metre standoff from the brook. There'll be no bunding or ground raising adjacent to the brook, or indeed in any of the flood risk areas. So any soil storage is on higher land away from the river itself. The plan is to not dewater, so it's going to be different to the tarmac quarry. So the sand and gravel will be worked wet with a long reach excavator at the side, and it'll dig the mineral out wet. So there's no need to lower the water tables. In creating that void space, and the same as with the tarmac site, we create extra flood storage. So because we're not raising the land between the quarry and the brook will be able to flood over in exactly the same way as it does now, but it'll have a bigger void space to flood into. And that's during the operational phase, and then in the restoration phase it'll be the same because the site's going back to a water body, so that creates additional flood storage. Then the water level within the flooded brook will be controlled by groundwater levels. So and to answer the issue about the lakes to a certain extent, generally because it's an open water body, you get a different evaporation off there that you wouldn't get if the water was underground. So you tend to find that lake levels will lower the water table more than it will raise the water table.
Thanks. I'm not sure whether you might have just answered the next question, but I'm going to read it out anyway, and if you have, tell me to move on. Your plan is to bund the area to be quarried. Local knowledge is that the brook floods onto these fields known locally as the Goose Pasture, north of the brook and east of A49. Are you keeping water out or in? And following that, what do you think will happen to the levels back upstream now that the water cannot now escape and heave out onto these fields?
So, as I explained earlier, all of the soil bunding will be away from the brook, so there's no plan to stop water from Wellington Brook coming into the site, so it'll continue to flood as normal. So the levels upstream shouldn't be affected in any way.
So the final question is, can you confirm that this new quarry development will not exacerbate flooding in Wellington?
Yes.
Okay, that completes the section about the possible causes of the